Hello, students. Very good evening. So, in this session today, we have to talk about the final phase or final topics of body fluids and circulation. So, in the earlier sessions, we had finished until body fluids and a little bit about the coagulation of blood, right? So, today we will start with anatomy of human heart and how our heart functions. Okay. So, let's begin with our first slide. Okay, one second. Yeah. So we talk about our human heart. It is a wonderful machine. So it's not a machine, it's a wonderful organ because we know that our human heart has a tremendous capacity of pumping. So it pumps blood from heart to the lungs and back from lungs to the heart and then from heart to the rest of the body. I know that it is hard to follow this statement, but when we study the anatomy and how the heart helps in uh, achieving all these things, it will be very easy for us to understand its role. Okay, so on an average a human heart beats around 75 times, okay, in a day, sorry, 75 times in a minute. And if you see, per every heartbeat, for every beat, your heart pumps around 70 ml or 70 milliliters of blood. So in 1 minute you have around 5.5 liters of blood that is pumped away from your heart. Now, where is your heart located? Anatomically, the location of the heart is in the thoracic cavity. So, what is thoracic cavity? Thoracic chambers or the thoracic cavity is the you have the rib cage, isn't it? Anything that is present within the ribs is called as thoracic cavity or thoracic chamber. Now, your heart, if I ask you guys where is it located, you would some of you will tell it's in the left side of your chest, but actually it is wrong. So that is why we need an anatomical location of where our heart is located. Our heart is located in a region called as mediastinum. So all the white dots you see on this diagram, okay? So these dots, I'll just mark it again with my red marker. So this is called as mediastinum. So in this mediastinum is where your heart is centrally located. And the heart is a little bit towards the left side, okay, anatomical left side of your human body. That is why most of the people just confused with the location of the heart is on the left side. No, heart is centrally located in a region called as mediastinum. So this is mediastinum, okay, and it is a little bit towards the left side. Now coming to uh, you know coming to your heart. So the heart, actually, the location of heart is very, very significant for one particular reason, for many reasons actually. But when we see ourselves in a situation where a person is undergoing a cardiac arrest, imagine that a person is undergoing a cardiac arrest and he requires help in his life being saved. What would you do? If his heart is stopped, we already know that move in any of these sources that they press their chest very rapidly, several times a minute. So what is this called as? This is called as cardiopulmonary resurrection, or it is also called as CPR. Cardio means heart, pulmonary means lungs, resurrection means we need to pump the blood from the heart to the lungs, okay, and from the lungs to the brain so that the person wakes up and gets okay. So the CPR, okay, is performed in a patient whose heart has stopped. So while performing the CPR technique, usually it is suggested that you place your hand between the T4 and the T9 of the thoracic vertebrae. Okay, T9 means thoracic vertebrae, that is your backbone. Or you just calculate, you just count your ribs to the five ribs, and then you press it gently on very rapidly several times, maybe 50 times or 100 times, and you keep doing it until a person resurrects. So this is a very, very life-saving technique that helps a lot of in a very emergency situation, which you cannot expect that when it would come. Okay, so that's why CPR is very, very important, and that's why the location of knowing the location of the heart is highly significant for all of us. Okay, now coming to anatomical dimensions or the size and shape of the heart. So heart is approximately 12 centimeter in length, 8 centimeter in width, and then you have 6 centimeter in thickness. Whereas if you compare the weight of the female heart to the weight of the male heart is heavier, compared to that of the female heart. So the female heart is around 250 to 300 grams, whereas the male heart is around 300 grams to 350 grams in mass. So male have higher mass compared to that of the female. Now listen, students, one thing you have to remember is these numbers. So there were questions where they had asked the weight of a male human heart is. So there were several options given, but remember it's around 300 to 50 grams. So you can just choose the wrong statements or choose the statements from the given below, which is right or which is wrong. In those statements also, this facts might be asked or given. The male heart is around 350 to 400 grams. So they might give a question like this. So that's why it's very necessary, these two statements. Which one? Female heart is 50 to 300 grams and the male heart is 300 to 350 grams. Okay. Now, coming to the chambers and the circulation through the heart, let's directly go back to the diagram. It will be easy for us to understand. If you look at our heart is divided into 4 chambers, okay, that we already know. See, this is one division, okay. This is another division, okay. This is one division, sorry. Here is one, here is one, okay. Now, whatever you see here, and whatever you see here, this is called as right and left atrium. You see here, this is called as left atrium and this is called as the right atrium. Okay, this is called as the right atrium. Now, the atria or the atrium are called as the receiving chambers. What are the atriums called as? Receiving. Okay, receiving chambers. Now, what do? They receive the blood. Okay. So now we have 2 atria. One is the right atrium. Other one we have is the left atrium. Now, what do they receive? If you look at your right atrium receives deoxygenated blood. Okay. What do they receive? Deoxygenated blood. All right. Whereas the left atrium, what does it receive? It receives oxygenated blood. So it receives oxygenated blood. Now let's see how do we receive deoxygenated blood. So the blood from the tissues, like for example, it might be your brain, it might be your neck, it might be your chest, it might be your stomach. So all of these tissues, they require oxygen. So after they metabolize, what happens? The carbon dioxide is released, correct, right? So this carbon-rich blood or deoxygenated blood, which is accumulating in the tissues, it has to reach the heart. Why? Because we have to breathe out the carbon dioxide, correct, right? So from the upper part of the body, that is the head, neck, chest, until the diaphragm region, all of this is called as the superior, okay, the superior region, anterior region. So in the anterior region, what happens, or the upper region, there is the vein that collects the deoxygenated blood, which we call it as superior vena cava. Superior vena cava brings body from up, okay, anterior body. From anterior body, superior vena cava, it receives the blood and it dumps here. Similarly, if you look at the inferior vena cava, it is the posterior body. Like your kidneys, your abdomen, your stomach, your intestines, your legs, etc. Wherever there is deoxygenated blood, it is collected from the inferior vena cava, and it is pumped and it is poured into your right atrium. So right atrium becomes a receiving chamber for the superior and the inferior body through 2 different vessels. One is called as superior vena cava, other one is called as inferior vena cava. Understood? Now coming to your left atrium. Left atrium receives oxygenated blood. So where does the oxygenation takes place? Where do your get mix up blood gets the oxygen from? Correct, right? It gets from your lungs. When you breathe in, you fill your lungs with air. So the air is very rich in oxygen. So now what happens? Your blood vessels, which carry the blood to your lungs, they get oxygenated, or the blood picks up the oxygen from the lungs. Once the oxygen is picked up from the lungs, now where it has to go, students? It has to go back to the heart. So listen, from lungs to the heart or from heart to the lungs is the only place, okay, where veins carry oxygenated blood and arteries carry deoxygenated blood. Okay. So what I see, arteries carry deoxygenated blood and veins carry oxygenated blood. Where is it happening? Only between heart and lungs. Okay, it's reverse order. So here what happens? The left lung will pump the oxygenated blood, as well as the right lung pumps the, right lung also gives the oxygenated blood. The blood from the left lung is picked up by the left pulmonary veins, whereas the blood from the right lungs is picked by right pulmonary veins. You can see left pulmonary veins, left lung, and the right pulmonary vein, here it is, okay, right pulmonary vein is what? Right lungs. So the blood from the left lung and the right lung, which is oxygenated blood, is picked up by your left pulmonary veins. Pulmonary means what? Lungs, okay. Left lung, left pulmonary vein, right pulmonary vein, what do they bring? Oxygenated blood. So these oxygenated blood will come all the way from the lungs, and it opens up into which one? The left atrium. So left atrium, oxygenated blood, and the right atrium, deoxygenated blood. The right atrium receives from superior and inferior vena cava, from the anterior and the posterior parts of the body, which is deoxygenated blood. Whereas if you talk about the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. So which lungs? Left lung and right lung. Which are the blood vessels that are carrying? That is left pulmonary veins and the right pulmonary veins are the two veins which are carrying oxygen rich blood from the lungs to the heart. Okay, are you guys following me? Yes. Okay. So now as we talk about the next part, okay, so it's very easy, isn't it? I hope you're understanding. If you guys have, okay, please ask me now. Or is my voice audible? Can you see the slide properly? If you have anything, you can just put it in the chat box. And the students from YouTube, you can chat box. Students who are in the Zoom, you can put it in the message. Okay. So chalo. So hold on. Yeah. So we understood about the arteries and which are the left artery and the right artery and the is received in the left, you see, in the right atrium, we received this blood. So what happens here? The deoxygenated blood has to go for the oxygenation because this particular blood is not good for our body. Our body will collapse if there is more carbon dioxide in the brain. If there is more carbon dioxide in the tissues, our body will actually collapse. So that is why what happens is when you have the blood that is filled, see, this is the chamber. See, this is the chamber, the right atrium. The right atrium is getting filled up by carbon dioxide rich blood or CO2 rich blood. Correct, right? So if the CO2 rich blood goes into the lower chamber, so the lower chambers is called as right ventricles and left ventricles. The right ventricles receives the blood from right atrium. Okay, right atrium, it will contract, means squeeze. When it squeezes, the blood from the right atrium goes to our right ventricle. Now I told you one thing. The atria is called as receiving chamber. What about ventricle? Ventricle is called as pumping chamber. Sorry. They're called as what? Pumping chamber. Okay. So what is happening here? Now the blood is filling up in your right atrium. From the right atrium, once the chamber is full, it will pump. Once it is pumping, the blood will be received in our left ventricle. Sorry, right ventricle. Right atria to right ventricle. So here the blood flows and here is where it is getting filled up. Now, what do we do with this deoxygenated blood? Where should it go for oxygenation? It has to go to our lungs, correct, right? So that is what our right ventricles does. So what do our right ventricle do? The right ventricle receives the blood from our right atrium. Once it receives the blood from our right atrium, now once these ventricles are full, now again it will contract. Once the right ventricles contract, now what happens is the blood starts moving towards pulmonary trunk. Okay, what does it? Where does it move? It moves towards pulmonary trunk. You can see here. Okay, pulmonary means what did I tell you? What about pulmonary? Pulmonary means lungs. So these are the vessels that carry the blood from right ventricle all the way to the lungs. So if it has to go from right ventricle to the lungs, there has to be a pipeline or a vessel. So this vessel is nothing but pulmonary trunk. So we have the blood in the right ventricle. The right ventricle contracts. As it contracts, as it squeezes, the blood rushes into this vessel called as pulmonary trunk. Now, once it moves towards a pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary trunk again divides into two branches, left and right. Very simple to understand this. Okay, we call it as left pulmonary artery and right pulmonary artery. Before we talked about left pulmonary vein and right pulmonary vein. In the left pulmonary vein, we told that it is oxygenated blood. Now here it is reverse, correct, right? See here, the left pulmonary artery and then have right pulmonary artery. The left pulmonary artery will go and take the blood to your right lung, and the left pulmonary artery will take the deoxygenated to your left lung. Did you follow? Can I repeat again? Okay. Are you guys following me? Are you able to understand? Yes, no? Okay. 1 second, students. I'll just see if you have any doubts. Okay. And see if you guys are able to follow. Oh, chalo. We don't have any doubts then. Okay. So listen, I will just erase all the ink again and then I will talk about it. So what did I tell about ventricles? Ventricles are receiving chambers and we are talking about right ventricle first. What is right ventricle doing? Right ventricle is receiving deoxygenated blood from the right atria. Once it receives the blood from deoxygenated blood from the right atria, what happens? The ventricles get filled up. Once it gets filled up, the ventricles will contract again. Once it is pumping, where the blood should go? The blood should go to our lungs. Why it has to go for lungs? Because it is the it is what do you tell? It is very rich in carbon dioxide, correct, right? So what happens? It has to go for oxygenation. So this blood, okay, the carbon dioxide rich blood, okay, or deoxygenated blood, what happens once it is filling up in the right ventricle? Okay, the right ventricle will pump. Once it pumps, the blood moves into our one vessel, which we call it as pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary means lungs. Okay, once it goes into our pulmonary trunk, again the trunk divides into two branches. What are those? The right, excuse me, excuse me. The right pulmonary vein and the left pulmonary vein. The right pulmonary vein will take it to the right lung, okay, and then left pulmonary vein will take it to the left lung, okay. Sorry, yeah, left lung and right lung. So they carry what blood? It is sorry, artery, okay, right pulmonary artery and left pulmonary artery. Sorry, students, I mistakenly pointed it. Yeah, right pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery. Artery carries what? Deoxygenated, deoxygenated blood. Okay. They carry what? Deoxygenated blood from heart to the lungs. Now, the lungs, their oxygenation will happen. Once the oxygenation is happening in the lungs, now what happens? It comes to our, through our left pulmonary veins and right pulmonary veins. So once it comes through left pulmonary vein from the left lung and the right pulmonary vein from the right lung, it fills our left atria. Once the left atria is full, again it contracts. It contracts and fills the lower chamber. Which is the lower chamber? The left ventricle. the left ventricle is very, very important and it is very, very thick. Every chamber is important, but left ventricle has a special role to play. Why? Because it is very, very powerful chamber. Once it has received the oxygenated blood from our left atrium, its job is to supply the blood all the way to the rest of the body. So once it fills up our, hold on, let me erase the ink. Okay. See, this chamber is filled with blood. Which blood? Oxygen rich blood. I'll write it here. Oxygenated blood. So this oxygenated blood from our right ventricle has to move to the rest of the body. So it goes how it just contracts and through superior vena cava. See here, superior vena cava, and then we have, excuse me. The blood gets pumped through the aorta, and through aorta, it goes into systemic circulation. Systemic. Nothing. The blood from your left ventricle, which is oxygen rich, once it contracts, it goes for systemic circulation through aorta. So, what is systemic circulation? The rest of the body. So, we have pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation is supply of blood to the lungs. Renal circulation is a supply of blood to our kidneys. Okay. Systemic circulation is supply of blood to all the rest of the body. Okay, students, are you following me? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Uh, Hold on, students. I think are you able to listen to me, students? Is there any problem? No. Students from YouTube, can you just confirm? Yeah. Wait, students. I think something. Are you able to hear me? Just you will check the live stream, right? Oh, 1 second. 1 second. Yeah. Um, Students from YouTube.